Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It is great to be back with you again. I presented a similar bill last year, about around this same time in early February. For the record, I'm Nicole Macri. I am state representative from the 43rd Legislative District. And I am pursuing this policy change because of the urgent need to address climate change and the importance of eliminating carbon outputs in our transportation sector. We cannot keep waiting. I ask you, will the switch to electric cars happen overnight? No, but they are and will be happening a lot quicker than many of us had imagined even a couple of years ago, as you heard in the presentation that you just had preceding this bill hearing. And despite my consistent attempts to promote this policy in recent years, 2030 is still a long ways off. Just in the time I've been engaging with this committee and others on this bill, we've seen incredible progress and innovations in zero-emission vehicles, and we expect to see more to come. The transition away from internal combustion engine vehicles that once felt very aspirational is within sight, but it cannot come soon enough, and we must be prepared for it. Having a date certain for a gasoline phase out to begin will be critical to plan for and build the charging infrastructure necessary for mass electrical vehicle adoption so that all Washingtonians can take advantage of the savings. This bill is good for the environment. We'll be able to power our transportation with clean, locally generated power. It will remake Washington's transportation system into a clean, quiet, state-of-the-art system. This bill is good for consumers. Studies show that EVs are reaching cost parity with gas cars and will do so even before 2025. It lowers the high cost of fuel and car repairs for low-income families. Gasoline costs around 12 cents a mile and electricity about 3 cents. This bill is good for the economy. Policy certainty will stimulate a boom in charging construction and in EV manufacturing. And more to come on that. It will allow us to keep over $6 billion that we spend on gasoline at home. And that money at home will be an enormous boost for all of us at a time we need it. And finally, this bill keeps up with global and expanding national trends. Most of Europe, China, and British Columbia is already going in this direction. Last year, the United Kingdom announced that they were enacting a similar policy right before the esteemed members of this committee heard this bill. And as you heard from Jennifer in her really great presentation of the bill, California named its intention to move to 100% clean new vehicles by 2035 this past September. And right on cue, last Thursday, General Motors said it planned to phase out gas-powered cars and trucks and sell only zero-emission vehicles by 2035. They must have seen the chair's agenda for today's bill hearing. I thank the committee for your consideration, and hopefully I'm prepared to take your questions, or if I'm not, direct them to some of the testifiers you'll see today.
Okay, are there any real questions for Representative Macri before we let her go? Representative Barkas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Macri, for one of the best presenters of bills in this legislative body. You do a great job. But the policy we'll discuss, of course. I just wanted to ask, I just caught, as I was listening to this, I mean, we just heard a presentation about the electrification and the challenges ahead and the grid and everything else. And anytime we see policy that is, it makes it unlawful for people to register anything but a certain product. It's concerning in some ways, but you just referenced China as an example, and I'm wondering if you can put that in context, because I just read a recent article. The only way China is keeping up with their electrical grid is I think it's 125 coal-fired power plants are in construction right now in China to meet with the ever-increasing demand. So I'm just wondering what was that reference? Because I know that our neighbors to the north are doing a pretty good job in Canada, but China, I would have a hard time with putting that together.
Yeah, totally understood. And thankfully, our policies here in Washington State are very different than those in China. And as you heard in the presentation prior to this bill hearing, we're very fortunate to have very clean, inexpensive electricity in Washington State, and moving even more towards that with the policies that the legislature has enacted in recent years. And so China is just one example. Multiple countries in Europe have also moved in this direction. And, as I mentioned, California being the first state in the United States really to name its intention to move more rapidly towards EV adoption.
I'm going to take 2 more questions. We're going to be easier than we were last time on Representative Macri. Representative Walsh, and then Representative Sutherland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Rep. Macri. It's always interesting to talk about this bill. One of the impressive parts to me of Ms. Harris's review of this bill and bill analysis is the variables on variables of what a fiscal note would be. While the date is certain on this bill, virtually nothing else about it is. And I'm wondering if you can give us any insight on what the heck this would cost the taxpayers of the state of Washington, because what we heard in the bill report is nobody knows anything about the fiscal impact of any of the agencies that would be affected by it. So give me a ballpark on what this would cost.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Rep. Walsh. And you heard some projections around the staffing that would be needed to carry out a scoping plan. And that's in large part the point of structuring the bill as it has been structured, to set a date certain that is an ambitious but achievable date. The market has already sent us clear signals. The announcement from GM less than a week ago indicates that the market is moving very quickly towards adoption of electric vehicles. My concern is the state ready for that? Are we going to be able to support our residents in all corners of the state for this market transition in a way that is quick enough and is done in an equitable way? And it makes what the bill will do is, in setting a date certain in 2030, will allow state government to engage with communities and industry to do the planning necessary. This change is coming. And if not the change that the policy changes we've seen from other governments around the world, I think the announcement from GM for me is a wake-up call that the work that we need to do as a state is urgent. This committee has done tremendous work in this regard in preparing Washingtonians for a move towards zero-emission vehicles. What this bill will do is to set a much clearer timeline in our ability to get there and do it in an equitable way.
Representative Sutherland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, I'm going to be nice. She's too nice of a representative not to be. But if I can, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around where we're going to get this energy. You mentioned that we have some of the cleanest and cheapest energy available, but that's because we have hydroelectric power plants. Are we going to build more dams? Are we going to build nuclear power plants, which are very efficient? How are we going to generate this electricity for a fleet, where everybody, 100% EVs are mandated in Washington?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rep. Sutherland. And there is a lot to consider, including considering a world where individual vehicle rides are reduced over time. So this is one piece of a multi-pronged strategy that we need to take, and making sure that the grid is adequate and that we're producing adequate electricity to meet the needs of a clean energy future is something that we address not only in the Transportation Committee, but in multiple other committees in the legislature. So I think you're asking the good questions that come to mind for all of us, which is what this bill endeavors to find the answers to. I'll reference back to the public fleets study report that you just saw. That report and presentation was prompted by a policy discussion in this committee about what it would take for us to get to 100% zero emission public fleets in our state. And we have a lot more information now than we did 2 or 3 years ago when we started that policy conversation. And that's why I bring this bill forward and the kind of information I hope that we will get. And I will respond, I think, to the implicit question that you are asking, why a mandate? Why set a date certain? Because we know, as we do, say, in our legislative process, when we have a date certain, an ending day by which we need to finish our work, which we have every legislative session, we organize our activities to be able to meet that deadline. And that's why I think it's really important to set a date certain and to do it in a way that is ambitious but achievable.